The court chamber felt chillier than usual, not because of the temperature, but because of the atmosphere. Evren sensed it the moment he stepped inside, standing behind his designated spot at the edge of the council circle. The nobles were arranged in arcs, like a stage, their faces too smooth and their robes too pristine. He had never truly spoken in this place, not really, not as part of the game, but today was different. Kael occupied the head of the room, perched on the raised dais with one leg crossed and his hands resting on the intricately carved arms of the throne. He didn't glance at Evren yet. The debate had dragged on for an hour, revolving around a border dispute with a minor province. Petty nobles squabbling over farmland, threats of revolt hanging in the air. It was too small for armies but too loud to ignore. Evren listened quietly until the steward finally asked, "Any final opinions?" Kael's gaze flicked toward him. A signal. Evren rose to his feet. All eyes turned in his direction. He didn't raise his voice or rush his words. Instead, he presented his thoughts cold, clear, and calculated. "Split the land," he suggested. "Grant the lesser lord a ceremonial title. Let them feel valued, not dismissed. It costs you nothing and secures their silence." A hush fell over the room. Then came the murmurs. Kael remained silent for several long moments. Finally, he said, "Do it." The steward bowed. "As the emperor commands." Evren took his seat again. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The nobles were already whispering behind their composed faces. Lady Siren had been quiet throughout the session. But afterward, she trailed behind Kael down a long corridor, her footsteps sharp against the stone. "You made him real today," she remarked. Kael didn't slow his pace. "You think I made him dangerous?" he replied. "I think you gave him a voice, and now your enemies will pay attention when he speaks." Kael turned his head slightly. "I thought that was the point," he said. "To listen." She shook her head. "You're not listening, Kael. You're inviting something into your home and hoping it does not bite." He gave her a thin smile. "Maybe I like the risk." The rain started softly, almost like a whisper. But soon, it escalated into a furious downpour. It pounded against the windows like angry fists, while the wind howled through the palace halls. Thunder rumbled in the distance, echoing like cannon fire across the mountains. Evren found it impossible to sleep. He lay in bed, watching the lightning flash across the ceiling, illuminating the room in silver for brief moments. He listened to the storm's rhythm and felt the dull ache in his ribs where Halrich's blade had struck him days earlier. Then, a sound pierced through the chaos, a shout. It was too close for comfort. Another shout followed, even nearer. He heard boots pounding on the floor, metal clanging, and a door slamming somewhere down the corridor. Evren sat up, heart racing. Before he could react, his chamber door flew open. Kael stood there, panting heavily. His coat was half on, his hair drenched from the rain, and he held a sword in one hand, with a shorter blade hanging from his belt. "Get up," Kael commanded. Evren didn't bother asking why. He was already on his feet. Kael tossed him the spare blade, and Evren caught it mid-air. "What's going on?" "An assassin," Kael replied. "Maybe two. Why now?" Kael locked eyes with him. "Because I made you useful." He gestured sharply. "We need to go underground." They took off running, darting through the servants' wing, past dark kitchens and shadowy halls, where only the flickering stormlight illuminated their path. Kael pushed open a hidden panel behind a tapestry, revealing narrow stone stairs that led down into darkness. The door shut behind them, and the sound of the rain faded away. All that remained was the sound of their heavy breathing. The servant tunnels were cramped and chilly. The walls seemed to close in on Kael, and he had to duck a bit to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling. The only light came from a flickering flame he'd taken from a wall sconce before sealing off the passage behind Thima's warm, dancing glow that played over the stone in their sweat. Their footsteps echoed softly, quickening with urgency. They didn't say a word, until they reached a bend in the corridor, where Kael suddenly halted and signaled for Evren to stop. He strained to listen. Above them, somewhere far off, there was movement. Boots, slow and deliberate, searching. Evren pressed his back against the wall, feeling the cool stone against him. Kael moved in closer, extinguishing the flame, and they were swallowed by darkness. All that remained was the sound of their breathing. Evren's heart raced, pounding in his ears. His body instinctively knew how to be still, how to blend into the shadows. But Kael was right there, too close for comfort. Their shoulders brushed, then their arms, and Evren felt something else warmth. He shifted slightly, his hand grazing something wet, not water. His fingers found Kael's arm, and the fabric felt damp and sticky. He touched it again, more cautiously. "Injury?" he whispered. Kael let out a breath. "Shoulder. Shallow." Evren paused, taking a moment to process. He could feel the outline of the wound through the soaked fabric. He could press down hard, let Kael weaken, stumble, and drag him into silence, claiming it was self-defense. Kael was vulnerably no armor, no witnesses. It would be so easy. But Evren didn't move. His fingers tightened, not to inflict pain, but to hold on. "Stay still," he whispered. With his other hand, he tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound. Kael winced, just a little. They remained there, close in the dark, the only sound between them the steady rhythm of their breaths. Evren had no idea how long they stood like that, only that the moment slipped away, and he hadn't acted. The footsteps above gradually faded away, slowly. Then, silence enveloped the stone, thick and heavy. Evren kept his hand firmly pressed on Kael's shoulder, the cloth tightly bound against the wound. His other hand rested at his side, fingers still loosely gripping the hilt of the dagger. Kael remained motionless. He could have moved, but he didn't. After a long, drawn-out breath, Kael finally spoke. His voice was quiet, flat. "Why didn't you?" Evren stayed silent. He had no answer. Not one he was ready to voice. Not one he could even admit to himself. Kael didn't push him. He simply held Evren's gaze for a moment longer in the darkness, something unreadable flickering across his face before turning and continuing on. Evren followed. They walked in silence through the twisting tunnels, making their way back through the side entrance behind the west wing. The storm had passed, leaving only the scent of wet stone and the calm of the skies. When they reached the door to Evren's wing, Kael paused. He didn't appear tired, grateful, or shaken. He just looked at Evren. Evren's voice was low, barely above a whisper. It wouldn't have helped. Kael nodded once. Then he turned and walked away. Evren stood there alone, the blade still at his side, his hand faintly stained with Kael's blood. It would wash away, but the decision, that would linger.